You're listening to the Backroom Beer League podcast with your hosts, Jacob, Nigel, and Greg. Bringing you your fantasy sports content recorded from the back room. To stay up to date, follow us at BRBL Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and rate the podcast to show us your support. Now, here's Jacob, Nigel, and Greg to talk fantasy sports.
It is 9:27 p.m. on Tuesday, May 19th at the time of recording. And I'm going to have to go through that one again. Jesus. Slurring my speech here. Coors Light's got me drunk.
Has a stroke.
Drunk already.
That's 4% water. Let's try this again. It is 9:27 p.m. on Tuesday, May 19th at the time of recording. And as always, you're listening to Jacob, Nigel, and Greg on the Backroom Beer League podcast. In this week's episode, we'll be talking a little bit about our weekly fantasy picks, as always, to start off the show, the proposed NHL return format, the changes to the NFL's Rooney rule, the NFL quarantine crime spree over the weekend, and our new Overheard at the Water Cooler segment about fantasy sports. But first, like we've been doing, I'm going to start with my weekly pick. And this week, I chose to pick Ryan Mountcastle of the Baltimore Orioles. My weekly picks in general have been of a similar theme. I like to pick a sleeper from a sleepy team. And last week, it was Monty Harrison from the Miami Marlins. This week, it's Ryan Mountcastle on the Baltimore Orioles. And I shouldn't say Mountcastle is necessarily a full-scale sleeper. Like last week, I didn't even know Monty Harrison from a hole in the ground, but I had a really good review of him and how he could be a really good asset to add to your fantasy baseball team. This week, Ryan Mountcastle, he's a bit more well-known. He was actually talked about a lot leading up to fantasy baseball seasons in the past, and I'm not sure he might even have went in the first round of the MLB draft, when he was drafted. So Mountcastle comes to the bigs as a first base weapon in Baltimore, where there's not really a whole lot of first base action going on. I know Trey Mancini has recently been diagnosed with cancer, and he's going under chemotherapy for the next few months to try and get rid of it. And he's not even really a regular first baseman on the team. He's an outfielder who also plays first base. So needless to say, Ryan Mountcastle is actually going to come onto this team from the minors and instantly get access to the starting first base role on the team. He batted .320 in the minors, hitting 25 home runs and 83 RBIs in AAA, over 520 at-bats, and he's had 5 seasons in the minors, which means he's primed, he's ready to go, he's ready to make the team in a big way. And going through these names, like I said last week, Monty Harrison, he's on the Miami Marlins, which is a team that's really going to benefit from any kind of shortened season, any kind of adjusted format for the MLB, because it's not really going to be a team that's looking to contend. They're looking to develop their prospects, build for the future, and the Orioles are no different. So Ryan Mountcastle coming to the Orioles this year, he's going to get on the team right away in my mind. And he was sent back to the minors, I think, in March. But I think that was just a little bit of housekeeping during the chaos of the delayed MLB season. And should baseball resume, I think Mountcastle will likely have every opportunity to start first base, like I said before. And he could really quickly become a 25 home run, 275 to 280 hitter in no time. And as far as I'm concerned, first base talent in the league is really kind of lacking right now. I know I have Luke Voit on my fantasy baseball team, and as a Yankees fan, that's fine. I like Luke Voit more than the average guy because he's a Yankee, but I'd really like to upgrade. And if I had a Ryan Mountcastle come up this year and play on my fantasy baseball team if I owned him, I'd definitely start him probably over Luke Voigt, because I know Luke Voigt has some injury concerns. He's got some consistency issues, and there's not really a lot of other options in the league that I'd be willing to consider. But taking a shot on a Ryan Mountcastle, a young gun who's going to come up this year on the Orioles and try and prove himself, I think he could do a lot this year. And I hope anybody listening to this is aware of that, and you might take a chance on him in your fantasy baseball league.
Yeah, I don't know too much about fantasy baseball. I haven't played a whole lot, but I definitely take a swing if we can get it back.
Oh yeah, I mean, like, the thing about Ryan Mountcastle is that, like I said, I've been taking sleepers from sleepy teams. All the guys that I mention usually, with the exception of maybe one or two that I would see coming from a big team, they've been sleepers from sleepy teams. I picked Mitchell Robinson from the Knicks. I've picked Monty Harrison from the Marlins. Ryan Mountcastle is no different. I like taking sleepers, and I think this whole this whole segment is really based on sleepers, because it's our fantasy picks, picking someone who might not be at the forefront of fantasy discussion. And I think if either of you do get involved in fantasy baseball when the season rolls around, you know, first base talent is not something that's really plentiful out there, like I said. So if you pick up a first baseman late, you don't have one, Ryan Mountcastle could be a good option for this year.
Yeah, I'll hit into my fantasy pick now. After 2 weeks of doing hockey players, I'm back into football. My guy for this week is wide receiver from the Atlanta Falcons, Calvin Ridley. In 13 games last year, Calvin Ridley caught 63 passes for 866 yards, 7 touchdowns, with 2 rushes for 34. Ridley's a guy who benefits from a very pass-happy system in Atlanta, with really good underrated QB in Matt Ryan and Julio Jones opposite of him to take a lot of heat off. If he played 16 games last year, you could easily see 1,000 yards, most likely, probably at least 8-9 touchdowns. There were a few games I picked Calvin Ridley up later last year, and when Julio Jones got hurt, it was he was really productive. He was productive before that, but he was getting me 18, 19 points a game until his injury. But he's a guy, this is only going to be his 3rd year, so some people still don't really know him, still don't value him. So I easily expect him and his deep threat ability to be 1,000-yard, 8 to 12 touchdown receiver that you could probably grab in rounds 4 to 6.
Yeah, I've said this thousands of times on the podcast. Number 2 guys on offenses can always be insanely dangerous due to the heat not being always on them. And I mean, when you have Julio Jones, that's like you said, he's top 3, right? And I'll be excited to see how Austin Hooper leaving the team has an effect on the amount of targets that Ridley gets. I mean, I know they play different positions, but Hooper really was a receiving tight end. So I'll be excited to see how that affects him.
Yeah, I mean, I read up on him a little bit when I seen him mentioned in your notes, Nigel, and I read up on something that said he had a 15% target share from Matt Ryan in 2019, and he was able to turn that into a top 24 fantasy season. So that right there tells you he's special, and he might not be the most well known, but like I said before, and I'll say it again, this segment is for sleepers, and Calvin Ridley is a great example of that. And we've talked about in the past, like Kenyon Drake. A lot of these guys are waiver wire guys, or at least they were last year, and they've kind of proven themselves in the stats that have come out at the end of last year's season and into this year that they're not going to be waiver wire guys anymore. So the more you're aware of the Calvin Ridleys of the world in fantasy football, the better off you're going to be for this next fantasy football season.
I think it was a blessing for Calvin Ridley to be drafted to the Falcons in general, to have the guidance and, well, essentially the protection of Julio while blossoming into an insanely talented young player. Because I think this is what is this? He's going into his third year, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah. So I think he's gonna have a really, really, really solid career. And I agree with you, Nigel. I fully think that he can become a 1,000-yard receiver this season.
He had a lot of flashes, and his injury was super shitty, but he had a really nice year. He's got a lot of deep threat potential, and he's a young guy. He can run a lot of routes, and I think he only is going to get better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know he's projected for something like 15.8 or 16 fantasy points per game by lineups.com. So
that's good. That's money.
That's money right
Especially
there.
for a guy you could probably find fourth rounder later.
Yeah, exactly. I'll roll into to my weekly pick, and I ventured into the world of basketball, and my weekly pick is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who is now a shooting guard for the Oklahoma City Thunder in a backcourt that includes Hall of Famer Chris Paul, and Shai is an extremely underrated player. He averaged this past season that is currently on pause. He was averaging 19, 3, and 6. And for a sophomore guy, that is really impressive. And I'm really intrigued to see how this is going to play out for him in the next a few years when Chris Paul's aging. The one thing that I wanted to pull focus towards is that he, coming out of college, he was a point guard. I believe he went to Kentucky, and when he got traded from the Clippers to the Thunder, obviously he's not going to start over Chris Paul, but Billy Donovan was bound and determined to make this guy part of the starting lineup, so they've shifted his game into becoming a shooting guard, much like the Nuggets did with Jamal Murray. And I think that it's really shown his full array of talent when it comes to perimeter defense and athleticism and just pure scorer mindset. I mean, obviously his assist numbers are down, but with that, his points numbers continue to rise. I mean, he's averaging 10 more points a game than this year than his rookie season, which I think is a huge jump. And it's not out of the blue. I think this is going to be a regular occurrence for him. I think he's going to continue to be improved. I mean, the guy was in the most improved player conversation up until, well, a couple weeks before the season ended, when you had guys like just the obvious ones. I mean, Siakam is still up for most improved player, which is kind of crazy to me because he won it the year prior. But you had guys like Brandon Ingram who are averaging 28 points a game. So, I mean, Shai is special. He's gifted. I mean, if you look at him from a fantasy standpoint, he definitely could be in your starting lineup. He can play at either the shooting guard or point guard position. And he's an extremely versatile perimeter defender. He averages more than one steal a game. He averages 19 points, and he's a dog. He grinds. His effort is off the charts, and I don't know. I'm excited because I think he has not only a bright future for the NBA, but he holds a bright future for Canadian basketball, along with guys like Andrew Wiggins and Jamal Murray. So I'm excited to see what comes from him. But he's definitely an extremely valuable piece that you could get. I mean, I picked him off the waiver wire in my fantasy basketball draft this year, and he's nothing but consistent. So, I mean, this year, I mean, it is what it is. He's definitely already claimed in the leagues if they resume. But next year, I would not be surprised if Shai goes in the top 5 rounds of people's drafts because of his consistent playing style.
Yeah, I mean, you said it, Greg. He's going to be the future of almost Canadian basketball. It looks like going from 10.8 points per game in his rookie year, and then coming up to 19.3 points per game on OKC. That's a pretty huge improvement, and a 10.8 on the Clippers bench. There's a reason.
That's impressive.
Yeah, there's a reason why he's. There's a reason why OKC's one of the better fantasy basketball teams in general. I mean, it's players like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander that have promoted them to a bit more stature. I mean, I was looking on, not that I really trust Bleacher Report's articles that much. I kind of find them a bit of a faulty news source, but they ranked NBA teams based on their fantasy value and their players' fantasy value. And OKC actually ranked higher than I thought they'd be. They're like middle of the pack, which isn't the best, but I was kind of expecting them to be down there like the Cavs, kind of down near the Knicks, kind of near the bottom, but they ranked 16th out of all NBA teams. And it's like, players like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander that kind of prop them up and kind of said, okay, well, yeah, that kind of makes sense now. When you look at Shai's stats, it makes sense why they're at 16 on this list.
I can't think of a more pure point guard to team him up with than Chris Paul for him to grow. That's in the league right now.
A great mentor and a great player all around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, CP3 is a solid Hall of Fame. It's always good to learn from a Hall of Famer, but CP3 is like one of the best to learn from right now in the league for sure.
He's kind of a picture-perfect point guard.
He can just kind of be a dick when he wants to, apparently.
Yeah, well, he's also the president of the MBPA, so, I mean, there's a reason for both of it.
He can kind of be a dick when he wants to be. He has the right to be a dick.
I don't think you get power without being a dick when you have to be or want to be.
Well, I mean, it's true in any sport. If you're a good player, you don't really get anywhere unless you have the power to be a dick, and he just likes to use that power. So,
Chris Paul just has to stop guarding Steph Curry.
True.
Yeah,
that's all he like. People that are growing up in kids that were born in 2005 watching basketball, he's just that guy who wore number 3 for the Clippers, Rockets, and Thunder that gets crossed by Curry every year.
Yeah,
which is sad. But
to move on to the weekly rundown, the first topic we're going to be talking about is the NHL discussing a playoff return. The return would involve a 24-team playoff bracket, would take place in 2 hub cities with 12 teams from each conference in each hub city. And Vegas is being rumored as one of the hub cities due to its large hotel resort sector, being able to hold players and staff. The Oilers, Edmonton making a push to be a hub city, but would Canada allow it? And according to NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman, they've worked it down to about 8 cities to choose from. I think Edmonton's in there, Vegas, Toronto.
I'd bet you money that both Orlando and Tampa Bay are in there.
Not Carolina, somewhere in Cali's probably in there now too, especially since California, Arizona, and Texas are going to allow sports resume in June.
Maybe the Panthers Arena will finally have fans in it.
Maybe the Coyotes Arena might have fans in it.
Nah.
If it was to be done anyway, though, this 24-team playoff bracket could be interesting.
It
would be good hockey to watch. I know that.
How many teams are in the NHL? Is it 30?
It is 31.
31.
That means the Devils are not in these. Not that I actually want to see them.
Actually, if they're in the top 12 of the East, Nige, they would be, wouldn't they?
Yeah, It sounded like it was going to be just the East and the West, but like they didn't specifically say anything.
I thought it was the top 24 overall.
It could be.
If it is, I mean, yikes. So
I'm not sure.
Here's my opinion on this, and
would that make sense though? If it's
it would.
I don't know.
It would.
Yeah,
if it is overall, then it is. Yeah, the Canadians are the 24th overall team. The Devils are 3 points out, but you'd have to bring everybody to 69, at least 60. I think 68 games, 69 games. You have to bring everybody back to 68 games, so there's a shot the Devils somehow like squeak in that shithole.
Yeah. So one thing that people need to realize is that if the NHL and all these professional sport leagues decide that they're going to return, it's not going to be fair for everyone. And I know that's shitty, but that's just reality at this point. And, I'm not a fan. I understand why the 24 team thing is happening, but to me, like the Canadians being the playoffs, Jesus Christ. Oh my God.
Yeah, they did not.
What? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, they don't deserve it in any way, shape, or form.
This is literally being done because Artemi Panarin isn't going to be in the playoffs. About the Rangers.
But here's my thing. If you're going to do this, I don't understand why you would make it 24 just to make people happy when all you're doing is pissing off more people. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but realistically, if there's only 7 teams that are excluded, like no offense, Nige, but the 7 teams that are excluded definitely do not deserve to be in the playoffs at all.
Yeah, that's fair, but I'm with Greg. Like, if you weren't in the playoffs, then you don't deserve to be there. Like, I don't think we should need to extend it.
But I think what they're doing here with the 24 team idea is, they can't really have a normal playoff setup because there's a lot of uncertainty around how they're going to finish the last remaining games in the schedule. So what they're proposing here is that they do the playoff bracket a little bit differently, and I think they scrap those last regular season games, and I think that's what the whole debate about, whether New York should or shouldn't be in the playoffs was based on those last few games they had to play because they were making a real push once the season got paused.
They also have more games on teams that are already in the playoffs. So you take away some of those games and they're even in a worse standing, really.
True.
I don't think New York would have been a good playoff team. I hope the only reason I like extending it is because then we do technically the Devils get the Canucks conditional, so we get 3 first rounders instead of just 2. And that's fucking beautiful.
Yeah,
well, I think the conditional picks are definitely going to have to be adjusted.
It's weird.
Like if they make the playoffs in this scenario, they didn't actually just make the playoffs regularly. There's a lot of
kinks to be worked out.
Yeah, I don't know how this is in the very early
stages of development, and Bettman's a fucking moron, so I don't expect.
Considering the draft is supposed to take place before the actual hockey resumes, like we said before, it's definitely sketchy.
The one thing that I'd be excited to see is that 1v24 matchup with the Habs and the Bruins.
Oh, you fucking slaughter!
Oh no, it'd be like 6-0 every game.
It would just shut mowing through an Urquhart horde. Just
it'd be the 2 most obnoxious hockey fan bases.
I gotta get the Leafs in there.
Pitching. Oh no, they're delusional. They're not.
The Leafs are the Cowboys of the NHL. Changed my mind.
Who would the Leafs be getting beat by? Let me check this.
I love how we all just have a clown on the Leafs.
I think they'd be they'd lose. The Jackets would wipe the goddamn floor with them.
See, the Jackets are a weird team. They shouldn't be as good as they are.
Oh, no, they shouldn't be, but they are.
If you look at the Jackets stats in their win-loss record, a lot of games they lost were overtime losses.
Their coaching is fucking superb.
In fact, I'm pretty sure they had the most overtime losses out of anyone in the NHL by far this year.
Considering, they lost Panarin and they lost a lot of key pieces and had a lot of injuries. The fact that team As soon as
Before
there's
the pause in the season, the Columbus Blue Jackets had 15 overtime losses.
Jesus.
Yeah, so that tells you all you need to know about their luck rather than their actual skill, because the next number on that list is 12. Boston has 12 overtime losses, and New Jersey has 12 overtime losses, and Ottawa has 12 overtime losses. But 15 is astronomically high, I think.
All of New
I think they had a
Jersey's
bad run of luck.
OT losses are games that shouldn't have been in an OT because Mackenzie Blackwood fucking saved our asses for nothing.
Yeah. So if you turn like even 4 or 5 of those into actual wins, they're in a lot better standing.
It's nuts. They have
Another
a good
question-
future in Elvis Merzlikins too.
Another question that I would hold the NHL to, how do you decide your award winners? Do you go with how the season ended? I assume.
Yeah. I think there hasn't really been a lot of talk on award winners, because I know at least
Like,
what was it the other night?
Draisaitl.
Yeah, pretty
Like Draisaitl, Valevsky there out of Tampa is going to win the shit. Why can I not remember the trophy that goalies get? The Vezina.
It's a Vezina.
I hope Cale Makar wins the
I don't think there's a
Calder?
discussion.
Nah, Quinn Hughes has less points though. I think Cale Makar deserves it, but
I do too. There's been no real discussion with the actual players on that right now, because I think they're having to figure this out while they do the playoff thing. Because on a stream the other night on Spit and Chicklets' they have like a Chell tournament with a bunch of NHL players. Like John Carlson said he hasn't been contacted by the NHL, and I'm not sure if that's just John Carlson saying that, but a lot of like Carlson was supposed to be like the Norris winner this year in a lot of people's eyes, and right now it's kind of up in the air whether it'll be awarded to him or not. So I'm not sure if he's just saying he hasn't been contacted by the NHL about the awards, or if he really just hasn't been contacted because they don't know what the hell to do. I think if anything, they'll probably just cut off the rest of the regular season games, go with the 2014 bracket, give the awards as they were when the regular season ended, and move on from there. How they're going to do the draft picks like you were talking about, Nige, the ones that are dependent on teams making the playoffs, that's a bit of a gray area. Moving on to our next topic. The NFL is making a new Rooney Rule, and under the current Rooney Rule, named after former Steelers owner Dan Rooney, it requires NFL teams to interview at least one minority candidate for a coaching or senior football position like owner, GM position before making a hire. The goal of this rule was to ensure visible minorities were getting the same opportunities for higher positions, but it hasn't really worked. The new rule will make teams interview 2 or more minority candidates for a head coach position and 1 for any coordinator job. But some people think this is reverse racism at work, making even more interviews mandatory for these positions to minority candidates. A lot of people think it's not the right decision, and I just want to get some feedback from both of you on what you think this Rooney Rule will do going forward for the NFL.
Nothing. The original Rooney Rule has done nothing. The NFL, you can claim everybody, their argument is, why don't people hire the best candidate available? Well, it's clearly obvious that the best candidate available has to be white. Examples, Jim Caldwell with the Lions, one of the only coaches in Lions history to have a winning record, off a 9-7 playoff berth, fired for Matt Patricia. No logical reason to do it. The Chiefs' current offensive coordinator, who just came off a Super Bowl win, interviewed for 7 head coaching spots, was not hired over guys like Joe Judge, a wide receiver and special teams coach.
Mm-hmm.
There's something needs to be done, but the Rooney Rule, it's better than the proposed moving up draft picks, because then it was just going to be pity hire. and that would have been fucking awful.
Yeah.
This isn't
so
the right thing, but something needs to be done at least.
yes.
I don't personally. I don't understand how this betters anybody, and I really don't think it does. If you're providing people with interviews for head coaching jobs, knowing damn well that you're not going to give the job to them, I don't think that's fair. I wouldn't appreciate it if it were me. I mean, it seems as if this is just all coming out of Goodell trying his damnedest to protect the shitty moves the NFL has made in the past. And it annoys me in the sense that, like, of course, I think that minorities should be given the equal chance to be hired in front office or coaching roles or things of that like. But to be interviewed solely because of your race doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. I mean, Brian Flores got the job in Miami because he was the best person for the job, right? And I think that's great, but I don't think, and I think this is just like it's so obviously a desperate attempt by the NFL to oh god, what's the to make themselves look good in the public eye. I don't think it's going to do
definitely
anything.
a public relations move.
It's not going to do anything.
Like, you can see the reasoning behind the rule, but when it didn't work the first time, adding another candidate isn't going to make it work. Like, teams like the Cowboys literally just brought in Marvin Lewis for an interview just to get it out of the way. They had no intention of hiring him. Just got it out of the way.
And that's not fair to Marvin Lewis. Do you know what I mean?
Like, it's a shit show. And like, everybody knows, like, most human beings know it's a problem. But there's nothing like the way they're going about it isn't right either.
So
I think that the problem with the NFL, like this Rooney rule, and the proposed changes to it, making sure that 2 or more minority candidates are considered. Like, you just have to put yourself in the shoes of those candidates for a head coach position and say, if you were someone of a minority background and you were called in for a head coach position interview, you would pretty much be thinking from the time you entered the room for the interview to the time you left that I am only here because I need to be here for him to check off a box.
Which is more demeaning than not having an interview at all.
It's more demeaning than not being called to the interview at all. So what I don't understand here, and I know it's hard to fix this problem because you're not going to change you're not going to change the traditions or the tendencies of owners and GMs or what have you in the NFL rather. I just don't understand why they change it if it's already blatantly bad.
See, here's one of the main issues that, like, I've been thinking about this a little bit. I like, don't get me wrong, I fully understand why the NFL did it. I think it's stupid, and I don't think it's going to work. Because I don't think it's going to do or affect anything. So, Nigel, you use the example of the Cowboys bringing in Marvin Lewis, right, to basically have an interview for their head coaching job. So, like, Marvin Lewis was jobless; he was unemployed. The Cowboys reach out to him, and one other team reaches out to him for a head coaching interview because he was a previous head coach of a team in previous years, and it would look good to the public and the league if it was him. And the thing is, knowing that he had no shot at the head coaching job, knowing that he had no chance, what if there are offensive or defensive coordinator positions that are open that Lewis could be interviewing for that he actually had a shot with, but he couldn't because he was interviewing for these head coaching jobs because of his credible name? I feel like, does that take away opportunity for him? Like genuine opportunity?
It's such a it's the only thing in this. The owners voted on this today. The only good thing that's coming out of this edition of the new Rooney Rule is this isn't even to do with minorities. It's teams can no longer block their assistant coaches from interviewing for coordinator positions with other teams. They used to be able to say the language of it was from the end of the regular season through March 1st, teams will be disallowed from blocking assistant coaches from interviewing for other teams for bona fide coordinator positions, meaning genuine and real coordinator positions that they were likely to get. Teams could block their coaches from being interviewed, and that's no longer allowed.
That's not fair.
That has nothing to do with.
That's one of the good moves of this, but it's really the only.
Yeah, and it literally has nothing to do with the actual Rooney Rule that we're talking about. It's the only good thing to come out of it, and yet has nothing to do with the actual problem here at hand. It's messed up.
Thing that hasn't been voted on yet is the idea that you could move up 10 spots in the 3rd, 4th, or 5th, as well as game comp picks for hiring minority coaches.
Yeah, I was leaving this for the end of the discussion. I specifically left it out when I was going through it, allowing teams to move up 10 spots in the 3rd, 4th, or 5th rounds, as well as gain compensatory picks in these rounds by hiring and keeping minority coaches or members of senior football positions.
I hate that.
That is literally an incentive to check off a box
to get better draft picks.
Yeah,
it's awful.
It's a physical incentive. It's pretty much a currency. You're getting paid almost to keep minority coaches or members of senior football positions on the team, just for the fact that you can move up spots in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round, gain compensatory picks.
That is so dirty. Wrong. It's gross.
It's really gross, and I think it's just one of these things that separates the NFL from all other sport leagues. It's the only sport league that would even think about doing this, in my mind, and I think it's really disgusting.
You want to know how you show people that you're accepting? You allow Kaepernick to come back. You allow you do things like that. You don't make bullshit rules like this.
The Kaepernick situation is a shit show, though. His whole tryout thing went south.
But it could be solved, though. I mean, if I'm being honest, I don't really like Colin Kaepernick that much because I think I appreciate his cause and I appreciate his concern for the rights of minorities in the NFL and stuff. But I think he does make a lot of unnecessary noise surrounding his campaign and surrounding his proposed return this past season to the NFL. It's a lot. It's really unnecessary, I think, but it could be resolved. There is something there that the NFL could.
It shouldn't have been handled the way that it was initially, right off the hop.
You don't decline, cancel a tryout and then go to the media and say, if owners and Roger Goodell would stop being scared and get me in the league. That's not how you get a job.
Exactly.
It's you have to play by their rules and their sandbox.
There's problems with his argument, but the NFL, if it wanted to resolve it tomorrow, could extend an olive branch and say, come back. We want to do this for you and make us look good. It's solvable. It's definitely a resolvable situation.
It is. I don't think he'll get a position. It's been so long since he's played. It's a mess.
Yeah, it's been a long time. If they had done it last year, it would have been fine, but any longer you wait, it makes no sense.
He's kind of buried himself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially after all, like I said, you were talking about the the practice, the practice the tryout thing that he scheduled canceled, then went to the media crying, saying, this, that, and the other thing. Like, it doesn't make sense for him to do that when he wants to.
People were saying that like the tryout wasn't 100% fair, but if you're gonna go play for the NFL, you got to go by their rules. If he wants
to play football, if he really wanted to play football, like,
he'd have gone to that first tryout.
He would have went to the first tryout. Yeah. And moving on to another topic related to the NFL, over the past weekend, the NFL has pretty much turned into an episode of, well, actually, it's turned into Grand Theft Auto. It's turned into Grand Theft Auto, and NFL cornerbacks Quinton Dunbar of the Seattle Seahawks and DeAndre Baker of the New York Giants had arrest warrants put out for armed robbery in Florida on Thursday, May 14th, and both have turned themselves in. And then after that, I believe, Washington Redskins wide receiver Cody Latimer was arrested on 5 charges, including assault in the second degree, menacing, illegal discharge of a firearm, and 2 misdemeanors. And
Let me start.
Hold up, it
Bills
gets better.
DT Ed Oliver arrested in Houston for driving drunk and illegally carrying a handgun. I just don't understand. Before we start any conversation about this, if you see one report of someone getting arrested in the NFL, what possesses you to do illegal things in the same weekend?
Well, Dunbar and apparently Dunbar has I know Dunbar's been released on bail. I don't know about DeAndre Baker, and apparently his attorney has witness reports that he was away from the scene when it happened and all this.
See, this is a big deal because Ray Lewis killed people.
And Marvin Harrison literally shot a guy and got nothing. Ray Lewis possibly committed murder.
Possibly, that's funny.
I mean, when you have a lawyer
Marvin
funded by your NFL team, but
Marvin Harrison literally shot a dude and was like, "Hey, game day Sunday."
It's literally like a common sense thing, though.
The
Ed
Oliver one was hilarious.
If I see an alert on my phone or on Twitter saying Quinton Dunbar of the Seattle Seahawks and DeAndre Baker of the New York Giants have arrest warrants put out for them, I'm like, holy shit, maybe I shouldn't do something illegal this weekend and get myself arrested.
They find it to be locked down corners. They're just going to do it in prison. The Ed Oliver one was so
talking about man coverage. God damn!
Because there's video and this guy, you can tell he's hammered. His truck is just down the road, fucking swerving back and forth. And when he gets pulled over, this man is slurring his words.
I like your truck sound effect.
I like how the truck's going back and forth, not side to side, but he's putting the brakes on and reversing.
If you can find the video, it's fucking gold.
Man, here's oh my god. The first one, the 2 robberies, dude, you're making over $1 million a year.
Robbery.
The funniest part about this
pull your head out of your ass. What are you robbing? It
was at like a poker game or a card game, and they robbed dudes' watches, and it came out that one of the dudes' watches was fake, and it was only worth $600. So one of these dudes now has to what do you think's more embarrassing, getting robbed or having to admit that you had a fake watch to these guys?
Honestly, what are you doing that for? You're a millionaire. Oh my lord. The Ed Oliver one, pull your head out of your ass. You have a promising future. Stop being a little arsehole. The armed robbery, you're millionaires. Pull your head out of your ass. I don't understand. That's just the dumbest goddamn thing I've ever heard. Cody Latimer, he sucks ass. He can't catch a goddamn ball. Fuck that guy. So I don't care.
I found out he shot a gun in his fucking apartment.
Well, the thing is, even if you're on a minimum contract in the NFL,
you're making.
Why the hell would you be robbing someone?
You're set for life.
What the hell is the point?
You ain't gotta like it because the hood gon' load.
No, the best part was that morning Quinton Dunbar was on a Seattle Seahawks thing talking about how he holds his character, and it's you fucking are wanted for armed robbery in the state of Florida.
I understand. I'm speaking from a pretty privileged viewpoint, but it it doesn't take a lot for me to restrain myself from committing armed robbery.
You know, I don't think I've ever made more than $9,000 in a year, and I've ever thought I want to rob someone.
Listen, I get signed to an NFL team. I'm a cornerback. You know what? I just got paid hundreds of thousands of dollars at least, maybe even millions. The thing I'm going to do to take my career into my own hands is rob somebody at gunpoint for a fake watch.
Both have like $9 million guaranteed.
The next section we're going to go to is the overheard at the water cooler section, and we're not going to do our hot takes or debate topic this week. This is a section, a segment that we thought up for do's and don'ts of fantasy sports. So what each of us are going to do, we're going to give a do and a don't for fantasy sports, and then we're going to kind of unpack them a little bit before we wrap up the show. So my do's and don'ts, a do for fantasy sports is invest the necessary time in fantasy sports for both you and the other people involved. I know this past fantasy football season, we had a certain member who might not have been the most involved person by the final weeks, and he pretty much wanted to give his whole team away. Don't do that. That is not a valid thing to do in a fantasy football league, especially when other people are trying to win. It's not a valid thing to do in any fantasy league. And my don't underprepare for a draft. If you pay money for a fantasy football league, baseball league, basketball, whatever it may be, play for it. The draft is key in gaining a foothold over other GMs, and skimping here is only going to shorten your season overall.
My do is take risks, and that's not just in the draft, but in general, like
in life,
trades. Fuck off.
Live your life to your fullest.
But nobody wins their league because they, picked the safe pick every round, or, got the safe guy off the waiver wire. Like, I'll put an example from my league last year. I took a fat risk in taking Ryan Tannehill, and if it wasn't for Ryan Tannehill late in the game, I would not have made the playoffs, I don't think.
I took a fat risk taking Le'Veon Bell at the 8th pick. That did me a whole lot of good.
And my don't is trade or cut a player after one bad week. Everybody has, an off week is bound to happen, but some people are like,
Juan Soto had off weeks in fantasy baseball, and they didn't cut that guy.
Oh my God, Derrick Henry only got me 15 fantasy points. I need to trade him because he normally gets me 20. Not everybody's going to have an amazing week.
I agree. This is a really good point, Nige. But I will admit that I do this a lot because I have an extremely bad temper, and I grow an emotional attachment to this. And if I pick some guy up late as hell in the draft or on the waiver wire, and I have a big game and he gets me 1.5 fucking points, his ass is on the curb.
Yeah.
I don't give a fuck. But I know what you mean. I literally did this year. I can't. Oh God, who was it? I don't know. All I know is that Diggy picked him up and he averaged 20-something points a game. So we're living.
Yeah, it's trading and cutting players. Sometimes if you can see a downtrend coming, do it. But if it's just one bad week, fuck it, keep them.
Yeah, I mean, one bad week shouldn't define a fantasy player.
Nigel, your player of the week was Calvin Ridley, and I'm going to use him as an example because I'd keep an eye on Calvin Ridley, and 1 week he would have 2 points, and then the next he'd have 26, and then he'd have 4, and then he'd have 21. So I think that wraps him well.
Well, Diggy, the guy who won our league, ended up cutting Calvin Ridley, and I picked him up.
And he played well for you.
He did until his injury, but before that, he was doing really well.
My do's and don'ts for fantasy sports. Do prepare for the later rounds of your draft, everyone, because this is where the season's won. Oh, I feel like I'm rapping. Prepare for your later rounds. Another thing with this preparing with your late round picks, people often they often decide that if it's between one of these, like if they're trying to decide, they're picking the 8th round between these two dudes, and they base their pick solely on like stats in a previous season. They never look at intangibles or teammates or systems or anything like that. So I like trusting your gut in that sense in the later rounds will work really, really well for you. Like, I know I drafted Mark Andrews hella late in our draft, like super late in our draft, and there were tight ends that had their numbers were far more impressive. But I knew what Greg Roman was going to run. Like, it wasn't a surprise to anyone. I was like, oh wow, he's going to be running like 2-3 tight ends. Let's pick up a Baltimore tight end, see if it works. And the guy was like top 3 tight end in the league. So like that's just an example. For my don't be a goddamn homer, Patriots fans. I think other teams in your league will be thankful that you're doing this because it's not going to go well for you. Most of the time, unless you're having this team with the offensive potency of like the Chiefs or potentially the Buccaneers this year, as much as I don't think it's true. If you're sticking with one team, you fly high or you sink, and that's not the risk that you want to take. And selecting people that play for your team isn't going to be the way to go. I mean, look at Jake, for Christ's sakes. Trubisky is your starting quarterback?
Yeah, baby.
I
still fucking lost.
Don't be a homer. Don't be a homer.
I love homers though. Like, I love playing against homers because they're like, "Oh, I'll draft all."
Because you win. That's right. Yeah.
I had a guy in my league in high school draft a bunch of Steelers players, and I was like, "You realize they have the same bye week, right?" And he's like, "Huh?"
Well, I think a lot of people that are new to fantasy sports. A lot of people that are new to fantasy sports might think that, hey, Tom Brady is probably one of the greatest quarterbacks in this league. I should pick him up. And not only do they do that, but they'll pick a quarterback like Tom Brady way before anybody else in the league would ever pick a quarterback. Especially like, yeah, in like a PPR league, if you take a quarterback in like, the 3rd round, you're kind of screwed because
they all get around the same points.
Yeah. And taking a quarterback like Tom Brady, who's aging, who's, all these factors that are dragging down on his game now as he approaches the end of his career, just because he's on your favorite team, or was in the case of New England, or maybe he's on the Bucs and he's your favorite team now. Tom Brady might not be the smartest pick, even though he's one of your favorite NFL players. It's the same thing in any sport. If you pick, Martin Brodeur, sorry to say this, Nige, but Martin Brodeur, when he was in fantasy sports, when he was still playing, when he was on the Devils, in the later stages of his career, if you picked Martin Brodeur, you're probably not going to get a lot of saves.
Except unless it was 2012 Brodeur. 2012 Brodeur was a fucking
Who gives a shit about 2012 Brodeur, Nige? If you picked him in his final season, he's not going to get you a lot of points.
He played 3 games for the Blues and fucked off.
Swiss cheese.
Listen, goat.
Don't you listen me. Martin Brodeur was in his prime in 2000. 2000. That's 20 years ago now.
2008. That man's prime faded in like 2010.
Oh,
I'm going to have a stroke. I'm going to have a stroke.
Oh my God. You cannot.
Please move on before I drive my ass to the Valley, Nova Scotia and strangle some ginger kid.
Greg is off. Greg is being threatening tonight.
Nige, if you're saying that, then that means Martin Brodeur had a 20-year prime.
Maybe
he was in his prime from the early 1990s to 2010.
Why don't you just
Jake,
fuck off and let me live in this fantasy?
Jake, did you know that Joe Montana's prime ended in 2006?
Yes,
Makes sense.
I did know that.
Leave me alone.
If we could just somehow have a theoretical fantasy league where Martin Brodeur was an option in his later career days, I mean, I'd love to be in a league with Nige if he'd pick him.
Listen, my league.
I'm saying don't pick him.
I would have had Zach Parise, Travis Sajak, Patrick Elliott.
Oh God!
You can't tell me
Dinus Zubris.
bad. Dinus Zubris. Oof.
You would have had Minnesota Zach Parise, wouldn't you, Nige?
No, I hate Zach Parise. Zach Parise is like a distant memory.
Jamie Langenbrunner.
David. No, I'd have that 1 year David Clarkson played like a goddamn beauty and then robbed the fucking Maple Leafs from everything they owned.
Nige would be out here picking like New York Rangers Marian Gaborik. By the way, he's talking. Where did Marian Hossa end up in his last days?
Oh,
Chicago?
don't even get me going. I hate that dude.
I remember when Hossa pulled the reverse KD. He lost with Pittsburgh and then went to Detroit to lose.
Yeah, I hate that son of a bitch so much, man. I hate him. Oh my God, I hate him.
I'll pick Johnny Oduya, Devils legend, because he got traded for Ilya Kovalchuk.
Mike Rupp, Devils stud.
Sammy Vatanen.
Adam Oates.
Ooh. Jesus.
Capital
PK
stud.
Subban, Devils legend.
Oh God.
Trade
I shouldn't even
man.
care about Adam Oates. He was the pillar of a shitty Washington Capitals team before anything worthwhile got on there. So
Listen,
shout out Adam Oates.
the Devils haven't had anything worthwhile since 2012, and it hurts. Mackenzie Blackwood.
Yes,
is
we
literally
have
the only-
come to this conclusion many a time. Many a time.
I'm gonna be honest, like every week.
Yeah, because it's like every week I look at myself and I realize what the fuck have I done with my life.
It's just silence, and then you just hear Nige. Man, you know Mackenzie Blackwood's next up.
Okay, you can't tell me Blackwood's not good though.
Look at him getting offended.
God.
Oh shit.
Big Mac's God.
Oh, he's
Snyder.
still going. He's
Corey
still
Snyder.
going.
But you didn't
Oh
have
my
to put up
God.
with, Greg, you're a Penguins fan. You haven't had to put up with anything bad.
Yeah, I know, boy.
You've had like two of the greatest. You literally went from Mario Lemieux to like Sidney Crosby.
I'm
I
aware.
love how Greg's
I went
response
from
was,
Martin
"Yeah, I know."
Brodeur to
boy.
Corey Schneider and Louis Domingue.
Yeah, we don't drum those bum ass motherfuckers.
Listen, it's the luck of the draw. You picked a shitty team in the midst of the 2010s, Nige.
Listen,
I'm sorry.
I picked a shitty team before the 2010s.
Bro, I named my cat after Sidney Crosby in 2005.
Hey, my neighbor's named their dog Crosby because
I bet he's a freaking beauty.
He's dead.
God.
Alright.
This is a great spot to cap the episode off right here.
Hey,
I'm gonna do
R.I.P.
the
Crosby,
honor.
I guess.
I'm going to do the honor before this goes way down the line, way out of control.
You can cut a lot of this.
I'm not going to cut any of it, actually. It's good content.
No, the people will love it.
It's like Greg's Tiger King.
Anyone except Devils fans will love it.
We don't love anything anymore.
I still haven't listened to the Tiger King episode. I'm nervous.
Oh, my God.
He's nervous.
That wraps things up here. Follow our social media at BRBL Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and subscribe to the Backroom Beer League YouTube channel. Thanks for listening, everyone.